Hello, this is Wade Frazier. This is March 25th, 2026, 6:04 p.m. I'm going to resume my series of posts on spooks and you know, and their role in the world, role in my world. And I particularly their involvement in the free energy field and related exotic tech. And I spent several of those posts describing their role in my journey with Dennis Lee, et cetera. In fact, I just made a little segue to a series of posts in my second stint with Dennis and how we were subjected to a huge sting operation. And I can't get into all the spook attention that we got. There's just, I mean, this is the nature of the beast. I can't talk about everything. I could go on for days, believe me, all the spook related stuff that came to our doorstep that happened to so many of my fellow travelers, which I've heard firsthand from many of them, and then secondhand from many of them from very credible sources. And I'll never know. So I'll never know about most of the spook activity that targeted us. And they operate in the shadows. Again, they don't announce, they don't have a sign that says I'm a spook. So yeah, so and nothing much would surprise me on that score. And back to kind of the Yule Brown experience with my second stint with Dennis. When people go paranoid, they lash out everything around them. And I've seen, unfortunately, I've experienced this. I've been attacked myself by people who get in these areas and they realize there is stuff going on, spooks and contract agents and stuff. And then they get paranoid and they basically attack everybody around them in their paranoia. Yeah, you're off the deep end. I've seen that happen more than my fair share of seeing that kind of thing happen, and the wrong people get attacked, including me. I've seen this happen, experienced it. So again, this whole spook stuff it's an aspect. It's an aspect of the situation. To me, it's not that important, really. I mean, to most people, I think they think ooh, it's spooks and secret stuff, and the tabloid conspiracists have a field day. And to me, it's only relevant, really, to explaining why we don't live in the fifth epoch, why we don't have free energy today. So their activities definitely have contributed. Humanity's inertia is the biggest reason, but these guys have definitely punched above their weight. And in John Rappaport's listing of the 7 global rackets that control the world economy, intelligence, spooks is one of them. And they're a power unto themselves. And I've written about this before. They actually service the other rackets. And so if you get involved in medicine or energy or even banking, next thing you know, there's also spooks that are getting involved. This comes with the territory. Yeah, there's no escaping the spooks. And I've written had a close relative who was a contract CIA agent, worked for Henry Kissinger, and his part-time spook life ruined his life, led to an early death actually. So yeah, it's no fun being a spook, really. Um, my primary message is that energy runs the world. In fact, energy is our world. And the technologies to produce abundant and harmless energy are older than I am. And building elementary versions of those technologies is actually not that difficult. But it's not the stuff that garage inventors and stuff can do, particularly not something that the public can use. This is one of the big delusions that Brian O'Leary actually spent a lot of his later years trying to disabuse the public of, to educate the public on how, working prototype in some guy's garage, that's a long way from something the public can use. Now, hundreds of millions of dollars of R&D, et cetera, to get it to where the public can use it. And that's just normal technology development. So anyway, yeah, so garage inventors aren't going to save the day. Or underground, I see these underground, technology rebellion or something. And we're gonna sneak up on the global elite and stuff. And that's just to me, that's just adolescent fantasy. Yeah, I don't see any of that working. Um, and the reality of what again I encounter in my days with Dennis, the reality of I'm going to go through a list here of the stuff that's sort of beyond what we directly experience and what my fellow travelers experience. Um, the reality of all that is really beyond the imagination of the vast majority of humanity until they can use such technologies. And again, and they might watch a Star Trek show and think it wasn't that nice, but I found that people regard that stuff as entertainment. If they encounter it in the real world, it's a very different reaction that they have. And again, denial and fear are the predominant reactions when people hear about free energy tech. Uh, I've I've experienced thousands of reactions over the years, and so my fellow travelers experienced many more. And so this is just normal. And I'll agree with Stephen Greer on how ETs, free energy, anti-gravity, and other tech are all related, and particularly related with the spooks. In fact, I call the milieu spook central. Yeah, so it's the biggest issue on Earth, these technologies. And so the spooks are up to our eyeballs in this world. And if you get involved in this world, you will encounter spooks. This is just comes to the territory. Totally comes to the territory. And so again, the experiences, and again, in my writings, written about what Brian O'Leary experienced, Mark Cummings, Adam Trombley, Sparky Sweet, James Gilliland and his pal Max, Greer's Disclosure Project witnesses, and related people such as William Colby, who met his demise when he apparently tried to transfer some of that tech to Greer's organization. And all that leaves aside my friend's underground technology so that he was kidnapped for many years ago. So, again, when I told Brian about the show my friend got, Brian wasn't even surprised. And his reply was, "Oh, he got a show from the Spooks." And the people who put on that show actually told my friend that what the public calls ET craft and UFOs, etc., is their stuff. And actually, that agrees with what Greer says. So Greer says that most of what people see and call UFOs or UAPs, think are ET craft, etc., is actually closer to home. It's human made. But much of that human made stuff is from reverse engineering captured ET tech. I'll buy that. Definitely buy that. Yeah, so my friend got his underground technology show. My guess is most of what he saw was from reverse engineering ET tech. Which, again, Adam Trombley, he found his father's diaries, and his father was actually involved in reverse engineering ET tech. And so this is again, this is a part of this milieu. And if you get in very far, these are things you learn. Again, and then hearing, so again, my cop friend Gary Ween heard 3 weeks after the JFK assassination that Oswald didn't do it because he was part of a backfired a CIA operation to frame Castro to justify invasion of Cuba, and which the Operation Northwoods declassification 10 years after my friend published his book totally validated it. Yeah, there's no reasonable doubt that my friend Guru was telling the truth about his meeting with John Tower on this backfire CIA operation, which also was a part of the retail operation, but not the one that really killed Kennedy. And then E. Howard Hunt is the one who ran the operation, according to John Tower. And then the original Watergate attorney was E. Howard Hunt's friend because E. Howard Hunt asked him to bail out the Watergate burglars. And another crazy story, but the last time that Doug Caddy talked to Hunt, met with Hunt, again, Doug was trying to get answers, and Hunt admitted that JFK was killed over the ET issue, which again makes perfect sense. Again, related to the exotic tech that these global elite do not want humanity to enjoy the benefits of, because it wrecks their power games. They can no longer control the planet if everybody was free. If everybody was Richard and Bill Gates, they couldn't play their games. That's what's really going on, in my opinion. Um, and I could go on for days about the stories. Again, what I've seen, what I've heard of, the stories I've heard from fellow travelers in the field. Again, you know, all of them highly credible, uh, highly credible. Um, and that really kind of sums up humanity's existential issue. Yeah, we're gonna either meet our own demise at our own hand, or we're gonna go to the fifth epic over the energy issue. The energy issue is it, and I'm seeking people who can right the ship. Help me right the ship. I know who I'm looking for, and I know the approach that I'm advocating will work if I can find the people for it, and if not me, somebody else. But it's the thing where that approach, the love and enlightenment approach, will work for this. It will work. Um, just yesterday, I was made aware of a summary article on these recent coincidental deaths of scientists and others working in the space program and stuff, the exotic tech areas, and in fact, Trump's ordered an investigation or something on this. And then, in fact, in that article yesterday, I just saw that David Wilcock had died, actually committed suicide, just in this past week, and I didn't know that. I never really took, and this is, Wilcock's an example of these fringe guys who make these crazy claims. Again, Wilcock, he was a reincarnation of Edgar Casey, allegedly, which I don't take that seriously, and I don't. Yeah, this is there's too much of that stuff out there. And then, in fact, Stephen Greer actually allied with Wilcock, which when I saw that, I was really kind of surprised by that. And to me, that's one of the many missteps I think Greer has made to actually bring Wilcock into the fold. And Wilcock, according to, again, I heard this from the inside, he actually tried to basically steal what Greer was doing and sort of private brand his own version of it. Not a surprise. Yeah, kind of steal the company kind of stuff. Again, just another those kinds of moves. I've seen it too much. And again, Greer, his obsession with this mini alien, which is well certainly a human fetus. Again, Robert Ridley had an almost identical mini, little mummy, a century ago. So anyway, yeah, I don't think anything to that. Remains to be seen whether the Bugis here is going to amount to anything. I'm not holding my breath. But a lot of Gur's information, because I experienced a lot of it, he gained a lot of credibility with me because a lot of stuff you would talk about, I'm going, oh yeah, that's what happened to us. So yeah, so and again, Brian trusted Gur, which went a long way with me. And so yeah, Gur is kind of I wish him the best. Was always kind of I'm always cautious when Gur makes his claims. And there could be something in all those deaths. So the deaths are being investigated. Maybe there's something going on, but this is an example where it could be too much dot connecting. And I certainly won't count on an official investigation to discover the truth, particularly if there is something to it. Yeah, that's the thing. If there is something to it, I don't think we're going to hear anything about it. Be my guess, unless they can pin it on China or something. So yeah, so that's again one of the many part of the circus, all that kind of stuff. I wrote about how a leading space debunker. So when I wrote Brian's astronaut bio for NASA and got it published, this leading space debunker then attacked Brian's Martian credentials in his NASA biography, and he did it really, really stupidly. I mean, it's kind of like Brian's autobiography has a transcript of his astronaut interview where they asked him to go to Mars, kind of ordered him to go to Mars. And when I submitted Brian's bio, when I worked with NASA to get his bio published, they had no problem with his Martian credentials. Yeah, and Brian was the only planetary scientist in the Apollo program. So this was, yeah, that's not a stretch at all. And then again, when this debunker went after Brian's credentials, I asked Brian for some ammo if I had to do battle with NASA, and he gave me a couple pieces of information, which was the order, you better go to Mars. And the interview came from Alan Shepard. And then he was also told, I believe, by Arthur Rudolph, who was one of Werner von Braun's sidekick, both those guys, ran the V2 program, which, they killed 20,000 people to build the V2 rockets for Hitler, and then they use them mostly just on civilians. More war crimes. All sides did that. Um, and so anyway, so it looks like Rudolph was the one, I believe, who told Brian that he was hired as an astronaut because of von Braun. Braun was going to be the first talent in the stable for von Braun's long-stated Martian dreams. Von Braun was writing about going to Mars in the 40s, and so this was something that you know. So yeah, anyway, so when this the bunker, attacked Brian's astronaut credentials, I mean his Martian credentials, it was idiotic what the guy did. And anyway, the same guy. So he's both in my circles. This guy, when he would attack people who would make the case for ET craft or whatever, when he would attack people, attack these advocates of ETs or whatever, he would boast about his CIA and NSA connections. Yeah, obviously as an attempt to intimidate his targets. And Phil Klass also did the same thing. So these guys would again, they would boast of their spook connections when trying to debunk UFO stuff. Yeah, what the heck, huh? Yeah, so it's uh, yeah. So anybody denies that there's anything to it is just nutty. And I could go. Believe me, I could go on for days about this. And one of my friends that dated Hynek's son, who he was a Blue Book guy, and it was true that Hynek originally approached the issue as a debunker, but the more he looked into it, he realized that no, this is real stuff happening. And so, yeah, so there's again mountains of that kind of stuff. Or I didn't even put under Danny Sheehan when he got to look at the Project Blue Book declassified documents, and he for an hour, and he saw Air Force, recovering captured crashed ET craft. Yeah, there's so much to that. And Greer alleged that Armstrong and Aldrin encountered ETs on the moon in the Apollo 11 moon landings. And I'd heard that rumor for many years before I saw Greer write about it. I don't know, I wasn't there, but wouldn't surprise me. And then independently, again, just in my circles, I heard of the confession of an astronaut at the International Space Station who was there when some exotic craft parked next to the ISS for 2 days, blocking their egress from it. Yeah. And the way it works is that when astronauts are in training, they don't get ET training and that kind of stuff. But when they have encounters like that, then they're read in and they're basically told, yeah, you saw something, yeah, that's real, and you got to shut up or there'll be hell to pay. That's how it is. But not everybody can stay as quiet as the powers that be would like. So stuff would leak out like that. And again, I'll never say much more on that subject as far as that ISS encounter. Um, so. And again, Dennis got a lot of lead attention that was not really directly spook stuff. Not directly. For instance, a member of the Rothschild family, in fact, the guy who ran the Rothschild empire, um, at CIA's headquarters in Langley, they had these eavesdrop-proof rooms, and I think it was Baron von Rothschild, whatever, quizzed one of Dennis's associates for several hours in one of the CIA's eavesdrop-proof rooms, which they ran out there in Langley, about Dennis. Yeah, quizzing for several hours about Dennis at Langley and stuff. And then David Rockefeller called Dennis at home. When the day before Dennis's full-page ad for free energy stuff, before it was published, Rockefeller calls Dennis at home to try to dissuade Dennis from his free energy efforts. And not because they would be futile, but because they would attract the attention from global elites, which Dennis wouldn't like. So, and again, I regard the Rockefellers and Rothschilds as members of what I call the retail elite. Yeah, them or Donald Trump or Elon Musk or Bill Gates. None of those guys are near the top of the global power structure. And I could go on and on about the global power structure. How I understand it is that it operates partly from Greer, but not only from him. It's again, a lot of it's based on what we ran into. Um, and the ET exotic tech issue is definitely spook central. Free energy, the anti-gravity. That's definitely spooks are it's just you can't throw a rock in any direction out of a spook when you get into that field. And I run into many other spook situations, such as the suicides of Danny Castellaro and Paul Wiltshire, who are muckrakers there in D.C., who both committed suicide. Yeah, and yeah, it was, I mean, totally uncredible, uh, uh, totally uncredible. Allegate the official versions are just jokes. You know, kind of the JFK hit and stuff, So yeah, the official investigations are always a joke. And in fact, Paul Wiltshire, when he disappeared, Rodney Stitch, who I've written about a lot. In fact, I interacted with Rodney once. Rodney, he was actually asked by Sarah McClendon, who was this very famous White House independent correspondent. In fact, if you watch the movie Manufacturing Consent with Noam Chomsky, you'll see a segment on her in there. And she was working with Wiltshire as he was muckraking on Capitol Hill. And when he disappeared, actually, she asked Stitch what he thought about it. He said, "Oh, he's almost certainly dead." And then they found him in his apartment a few days later. And again, and what the story that Wiltshire got from his contacts was that Wiltshire was yeah, basically kind of lured out of his home to have interrogated, and then he was given a piece of pizza with a can of some soft drink or whatever, and the can was covered with a solution that had DMSO and curare in it. And so literally within a minute or two of picking up that can, Wiltshire was dead. And then they took him back to his house and set him on his toilet, as he was in rigor mortis. And then and again, and then like, oh, they found him at home on his toilet, and then the officials ludicrously said that he committed suicide. And not only that, but all the FBI and stuff came and they seized all of the documentation in Wiltshire's home while saying they had no interest in it. Yeah, this is again, this yeah, they kill you and then they take all your stuff, and then they say, oh, we don't know where it went, or we had no interest in it, this kind of stuff. This is really, really common in these areas. And then yeah, so muckraking in Capitol Hill, or even approaching Capitol Hill, a lot of issues, and these issues particularly, is a good way to end up dead. Eugene Mallow was banging on Washington's door and stuff. And so, yeah, so the untimely ends for people who do that kind of thing. And then the harassment assassinations back from JFK to Reagan. So Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, George Wallace, Gerald Ford, John Lennon, all of those assassinations and attempts had spook connections. Yeah, they're all connected to spook operations, one way or another. In fact, John Perkins, the economic hitman guy, he knew two Latin American heads of state, Torrijos and Jaime, president of Ecuador. So Panama, president of Panama and Ecuador, both of them refused to sell out their nations to the corporatocracies, what Perkins called it. So basically, what Perkins, his job was trying to get these guys to sell out their nations, knuckle under to American capitalism, so they would provide cheap labor and cheap resources to the corporate machine in the United States. And heads of state that refused to sell out, then they would come to untimely ends. And in fact, those two, so Torrijos and Jaime, Cameron's name, the Ecuadorian president, yeah, they had planes that exploded in midair kind of thing, which is a spook specialty. And I could go on and on about plane accidents, that the spooks were almost certainly involved with. Yeah, Gary Ween saw it regularly there in Ventura County. Yeah, that's his days at the office. Yeah, in fact, JFK was likely a casualty of the CIA's reign. Again, Eisenhower's warning on the military-industrial complex. I think Kennedy was killed by the MI6, most likely. CIA, Eastern Oligarchy, MI6, and those are the interests that got JFK killed. And that was Eisenhower's warning. Eisenhower warned about it. So just a couple years later, less than 3 years later, Kennedy was the casualty of that. And as I've said so many times, the city American president is just a stooge puppet. Yeah, they don't make any of the important decisions on Earth. And California, so where I had my life wrecked, yeah, I know way too much spook activity in California. So California is definitely a hotbed of corruption and spook stuff. Mark Cummings, his ordeal, not only his ordeal of inventing a free energy prototype in Lawrence Berkeley's basement and then being fired, arrested, interrogated. Then he tried to hide out and do it in secret, and they found him and cleaned his lab out. But Mark also eventually heard a bunch of stories from people in this biz about it was just normal. Yeah, when Mark went through, yeah, Mark, he was in way over his head. And yeah, you can't run and hide. Inventors cannot run and hide. I mean, Sparky's sweet, trying to have a secret lab there in the Mojave, etc. And then they threaten his life, and he dies a week later. And then they clean out they take all his equipment and documentation. This is standard operating procedure. Again, my life, Dennis shouldn't have survived what happened in Ventura there after the CIA's bill it all offer to go away. Rodney Stitt, he got kangarooed into prison in California. Again, no pretense for legality. They can kangaroo into prison, and I mean, yeah, and Gary actually saw where the gangster officials would erase the court transcripts. Stitch actually saw where they would alter the transcripts to say the opposite of what the witnesses actually said to kangaroo people into prison, and that's like the car company when we hit Ventura there. All the owner, and these are the guys that probably stole my mentor's engine. They got kangarooed into prison, and there was a witness, the key witness for the prosecution. They never seen the guy before, but Ford's payroll records were introduced into evidence, so-called prove he worked for them. And this is how the legal system in California works. That's the most corrupt in the United States. And so this is just, yeah, it's normal. And then for the first time, I'll admit that my CIA contract agent relative who worked for Henry Kissinger, actually, he lived in California when he was doing a lot of that work. And so, yeah, and gangsters, again, Harry Pregerson, the gangster that Gary ran into so much, he sat on the bench, the federal court bench there, Ninth District. Yeah, gangsters. So gangsters run the legal system, particularly in California. So anyway, so spooks are part of the global rackets and are part of they're a part of themselves though. And so yeah, so this is so it goes far beyond just free energy, but definitely free energy is sort of like ground zero for what spooks and stuff are involved in. Yeah, because you control that and you control the world. And so yeah, keep that tech out of humanity's hands and keep us mired in scarcity and fear, and it's easy to control humanity then. Even if it leads to our self-extinction. Yeah, so again, in my world, it's like the global elites, they have survival enclaves, off-world and underground and stuff. And so they're playing these games and they think that if it gets too bad, if they make Earth uninhabitable, they'll survive. They'll be able to hide out. And again, there's dissident factions. So again, the people who gave my friends underground show, they're dissident factions. And they're not insane. They don't want to live on Mars or underground if they make Earth uninhabitable. So they're the ones who are, again, they're the dissident faction. In fact, Greer says they're the majority faction now of the global elite. We shall see. But I certainly am not waiting for them to decide, save the day or decide the issue. But these dynamics are definitely real. Yeah, definitely real. I've been around way too much of this stuff over my lifetime. Yeah, for the last 50 years or so. So anyway, I'm gonna make one more post that sort of summarizes the whole issue of spooks, the global elite and spook game. And dark game. I think I'm playing low enough on the radar to where they don't need to try to take me out, but I could be wrong. So we'll see. So anyway, that's all I have for now. So bye.